Picture yourself kneading dough in the shadow of the Red Keep, where every cobblestone whispers gossip and the smell of fresh bread battles the questionable aroma of King's Landing's unique charm. Welcome to Whispered Sleep Sagas, where starlit tales unravel into dreams. Dim the lights, nestle into your coziest spot, exhale your cares, sink into softness, and let tonight's story, gentler than a hobbit's nap, carry you to sleep's cozy embrace. If this tale lulled you toward dreams, or made you chuckle like a drunk septon stumbling through morning prayers, give it a like and subscribe. No pressure. My ego's as sturdy as Harrenhal's crumbling towers, but your support keeps the firelit stories burning. The first pale fingers of dawn creep across King's Landing, like a thief testing unlocked doors. And already, the city stirs with the restless energy of 700,000 souls crammed into stone walls that probably weren't designed with proper sewage planning in mind. The Red Keep looms above it all, a crimson giant that watches over the chaos below, with the detached amusement of a lord watching peasants squabble over copper coins. You wake in your small chamber above the bakery, the familiar weight of flour dust already settling into your lungs, like an old friend who overstays their welcome. Through the narrow window, the city stretches before you in all its aromatic glory, a symphony of horse dung, sea salt, roasting meat, and the peculiar musk that only comes from this many people living in delightful proximity to each other. It's home, in the way that a comfortable pair of boots is home even when they pinch your toes. The stones beneath your feet are cool as you pad across the floor, worn smooth by generations of bakers who rose before the sun because, apparently, bread waits for no one. Not kings, not queens, and certainly not your aching back. Your name is Jorik, and you've been kneading dough in this same bakery for longer than you care to count, watching the city change rulers like a tavern changes its straw, while the constant demand for bread remains as reliable as a septon's sermon about temperance. King's Landing operates on a hierarchy as rigid as day-old bread, and bakers occupy that comfortable middle ground where you're important enough that people notice when you're gone, but not so important that anyone expects you to have opinions about politics beyond, I hope whoever's in charge still needs bread. It's a position that suits you perfectly, like a well-fitted apron that's seen enough flour to tell stories. The bakery below beckons with the promise of another day's work, and you descend the narrow wooden stairs that creak in a melody you know by heart. Each step announces your arrival to the ovens waiting below, patient as old dogs warming by a fire. The shop occupies the ground floor of a building that's probably older than the Targaryens' first visit to Westeros, its stone walls thick enough to muffle the city's morning chorus of merchants, beggars, and the occasional drunk still celebrating last night's revelries. Your workspace is a kingdom of flour-dusted surfaces and worn wooden tools that have been shaped by countless hands into instruments of perfect imperfection. The great oak table in the center bears the scars of 10,000 kneading sessions, its surface polished to a warm honey color by the constant caress of dough and palms. Shelves line the walls, holding sacks of grain that arrived yesterday from the Reach, where farmers still grow wheat under the same sun that warmed the first men, blissfully unaware that their harvest will soon become sustenance for lords and beggars alike. The ovens squat against the far wall, like stone dragons sleeping off a particularly heavy meal, their mouths dark and waiting for the fire that will transform flour and water into the alchemy of bread. These ovens have baked bread through the reigns of kings whose names are now carved in stone and the history books, their brick bellies seasoned with decades of heat and smoke until they've become something more than mere cooking implements. They're partners in the daily miracle of feeding a city that's perpetually hungry. You light the fires first because ovens, like people, need time to warm up properly before they can do their best work. The kindling catches with a whisper, flames licking upward with the enthusiasm of gossips sharing fresh scandal. Soon the bakery fills with the comforting crackle of burning wood and the gradually building warmth that will make the morning's work possible. The city of King's Landing was built by Egon the Conqueror, who apparently looked at this particular bit of coastline and thought, yes, this seems like a perfectly reasonable place to cram hundreds of thousands of people together and see what happens. What happened, predictably, was a city that grew like bread dough left too long in the sun, expanding in all directions with a logic that makes sense only if you squint and tilt your head sideways. The streets wind through the city like a drunk trying to find his way home. Narrow passages that were probably goat paths before someone decided to build houses around them. Your bakery sits on one such street, close enough to the docks that you can smell the sea when the wind blows just right, but far enough from the Red Keep that royal drama rarely bothers with your corner of the world. It's prime real estate for a baker, accessible to customers from all walks of life, from dock workers who need something cheap and filling to minor lords who want bread fine enough to serve at their table without embarrassment. The social fabric of King's Landing is woven from threads of gold and desperation, with most people falling somewhere in between. Bakers hold a respected place in this tapestry because everyone, from the highest lord to the lowest beggar, needs to eat. You've served bread to gold cloaks rushing between shifts, to merchants' wives who count their coppers twice before spending them, to children whose eyes go wide at the sight of honey cakes like they're witnessing magic, which, in a way, they are. Your hands know the rhythm of bread making, the way a septon knows prayers, moving through the motions with practiced grace that comes from years of repetition. The first batch of dough waits on the counter, pale and patient as fresh snow. You begin to knead, your palms pressing and folding, working the gluten into long elastic chains that will give the bread its structure and chew. Kneading is meditation disguised as work, a chance to let your mind wander while your hands perform their familiar dance. The dough responds to your touch like a living thing, transforming from a shaggy mass into something smooth and elastic that springs back when poked, as if it's playing a gentle game of catch with your finger. There's something deeply satisfying about this transformation, this daily proof that simple ingredients can become something greater than the sum of their parts, with nothing more than time, heat, and human attention. The morning light grows stronger, filtering through the small windows and casting long rectangles of gold across the flour-dusted floor. Soon, the first customers will arrive, dock workers heading to their shifts, merchants opening their shops, servants from the great houses sent to fetch the daily bread. Each customer brings their own small drama, their own piece of the great story that is King's Landing, and you've learned to read the city's mood in the faces of those who come through your door. Today feels different, though you can't quite put your finger on why. Perhaps it's the way the morning light seems more golden than usual, or the way the dough responds to your touch with unusual cooperation. Or maybe it's just the feeling that comes sometimes when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. The bread dough splits beneath your hands as you portion it into loaves, each piece weighed by eye and experience rather than scales. A good baker can judge a proper portion the way a seaman can judge the wind. It's knowledge that lives in the bones and the fingertips, earned through countless repetitions and the occasional spectacular failure that teaches you more than 100 successes. You shape the loaves with quick, practice movements that would look like magic to someone who's never tried to coax dough into a proper form. The secret, you've learned, is confidence. Bread dough can sense hesitation the way a horse can sense fear, and it responds accordingly. Treat it with firm kindness, and it will reward you with loaves that rise proud and golden. Show uncertainty, and you'll end up with flat, dense bricks that would embarrass a septon trying to demonstrate humility. The shaped loaves go onto wooden boards dusted with flour, arranged with the spacing of old friends who know each other's boundaries. They'll rise now in the warming air of the bakery, growing plump and proud while you prepare the next batch. Bread making is an exercise in patience disguised as productivity. There's always something to do, but the most important work happens while you're doing something else entirely. King's Landing wakes around you like a great beast stretching after sleep. The sounds of the city begin their daily crescendo. Cartwheels on cobblestones, merchants calling their wares, the distant sound of hammers on metal from the street of steel, where smiths shape iron into everything from horseshoes to swords. Your bakery sits in the middle of this symphony, adding its own quiet notes of crackling fires and the soft thump of kneading dough. The social hierarchy of King's Landing is a ladder that stretches from the mud of Flea Bottom to the towers of the Red Keep, and everyone knows their rung. Bakers occupy a comfortable middle position, respected craftsmen who provide an essential service. The Alchemists' Guild occupies a walled compound not far from your bakery, and lately there have been rumors of unusual activities, strange smells, odd-colored smoke, and the kind of hushed conversations that make sensible people cross the street to avoid overhearing things they'd rather not know. The guild has always been secretive, but recently their secrecy has taken on a quality that makes even curious people decide they're not that curious after all. I mind my ovens, they mind their. Whatever it is they do in there, you replied diplomatically. Though I'll admit the smell yesterday reminded me of eggs left too long in the sun. Garrett nods knowingly. In King's Landing, survival often depends on knowing when not to know things, and the Alchemists' Guild falls squarely into that category. Their work with wildfire and other dangerous substances makes them useful to the crown, but dangerous to everyone else, the kind of neighbors you acknowledge politely and never ask to borrow a cup of sugar. The social position of the Alchemists' Guild illustrates one of King's Landing's fundamental truths. Power and danger often go hand in hand, and the wisest course for ordinary citizens is to stay well clear of both. Your bakery exists in the comfortable middle ground, where you're useful enough to be protected by custom and law, but not important enough to attract the kind of attention that comes with torches and pointed questions. The second batch of dough is nearly ready for the ovens now, the loaves having risen to twice their original size, like small pale hills dotting the wooden boards. You score their tops with quick slashes of a sharp knife, creating channels for steam to escape, and giving each loaf the distinctive pattern that marks it as yours. These small details matter more than customers usually realize. The way bread looks affects how it tastes, and how it tastes affects whether people return tomorrow. Loading the ovens requires a kind of choreographed dance between you and the long wooden peels that slide loaves into the stone chambers. The heat hits your face like a gentle slap, reminding you why bakers develop the slightly weathered complexion of people who spend their lives near fires. The bread will bake for the better part of an hour, transforming from pale dough into golden loaves, while you prepare the next batch and serve customers who wander in drawn by the smell of baking bread. There's something magical about that smell, the way it seems to bypass the brain and speak directly to some deeper part of human nature that remembers when finding food meant the difference between life and death. Even in a city like King's Landing, where food is generally available to those who can pay for it, the smell of fresh bread still draws people like pilgrims to a sept. It's a reminder that no matter how complex civilization becomes, we're all still animals who need feeding. The morning customers represent a cross-section of King's Landing society, each group with its own schedule and requirements. The dock workers come early, needing something cheap and filling before their shifts, loading and unloading ships from across the narrow sea. They buy yesterday's bread at reduced prices, understanding that day-old bread toasted over a fire tastes almost as good as fresh, and every copper saved is a copper that can go toward rent or ale, or the small luxuries that make hard work bearable. Merchants' wives arrive later, after they've sent their husbands off to conduct the day's business and gotten their households organized for the day ahead. These women know the value of good bread. They understand that serving quality food reflects on their family's status and their own competence as household managers. They're knowledgeable customers who can tell the difference between bread made with care and bread made with haste, and they're willing to pay accordingly. "Your loaves have been rising well lately," says good wife Meredith, a merchant's wife whose husband trades in spices from dawn. "What's your secret?" "Good flour from the Reach, and yeast that's been in my family longer than I have been alive," you reply, which is mostly true. The real secret is patience and attention to detail, but customers prefer explanations that sound like family mysteries passed down through generations. The yeast you use is indeed old, a strain that you inherited from the baker who taught you the trade, who inherited it from his master, creating an unbroken chain of fermentation that stretches back through decades of King's Landing history. Each generation of bakers has carefully maintained and fed this colony of microscopic workers, understanding that good yeast is worth more than gold, because gold can't make bread rise. Good wife Meredith examines the loaves with the practiced eye of someone who's been buying bread longer than you've been baking it. Her approval comes in the form of coins counted out without complaint, and a nod that manages to convey both satisfaction and the expectation that tomorrow's loaves will be equally good. These small interactions form the foundation of your business. Relationships built one transaction at a time until trust becomes as reliable as sunrise. The social dynamics of bread buying reveal the deeper structures of King's Landing society. Goodwife Meredith can afford to be particular about her bread because her husband's spice trade provides enough income to support preferences as well as needs. Her willingness to pay for quality reflects not just wealth, but understanding. She knows that good ingredients and skilled labor cost more than their cheaper alternatives, and she's willing to invest in excellence because excellence, in turn, reflects on her family status. The contrast between Goodwife Meredith and your earlier customer, Garrett the blacksmith's apprentice, illustrates the different ways people navigate King's Landing's economic landscape. Garrett buys day-old bread, not because he can't tell the difference, but because he's prioritizing long-term goals over short-term pleasures. Every copper he saves on bread is a copper that brings him closer to completing his apprenticeship and starting his own forge. His sacrifice today is an investment in tomorrow's prosperity. The morning reaches its peak with the arrival of Septon Marcus, a thin man whose robes always seem to need a good washing, but whose faith appears unshakable despite his close proximity to the more colorful aspects of King's Landing life. He runs a small sept in one of the poorer districts where he ministers to dock workers, small craftsmen, and the kind of people who measure their wealth in coppers rather than dragons. "Blessings of the seven upon you, Jorik," he says, producing a handful of coins that have been worn smooth by countless transactions. The faithful need sustenance for both body and soul, and your bread serves the former admirably. Septon Marcus buys bread for his weekly charity meals, feeding anyone who shows up at his sept, regardless of their ability to pay. It's a gesture that costs him more than he can afford and helps fewer people than need help. But it's also the kind of small kindness that keeps a city like King's Landing from tearing itself apart. His willingness to stretch his meager resources to feed others creates ripples of goodwill that spread through the community like warmth from a hearth. "The seven know their business," you reply, giving him an extra loaf without mentioning it. "And so do you, Septon." These small acts of generosity are part of the invisible network that holds King's Landing together despite its obvious flaws. Your extra loaf will feed someone who might otherwise go hungry, and that person's gratitude will manifest in ways you'll never know. Perhaps a kind word to someone else who needs it, or a helping hand offered to a stranger, or simply the knowledge that in a hard world, kindness still exists. The religious life of King's Landing revolves around the Sept of Baylor, the great crystal cathedral that dominates the city's skyline like a jeweled crown. But the real spiritual work happens in smaller places, like Septon Marcus's humble sept, where faith meets daily life and people find comfort not in grand architecture, but in simple human compassion. These neighborhood septs serve the same function as neighborhood bakeries. They're places where community happens, where people connect with something larger than themselves. The social hierarchy of the faith reflects the broader structure of Westerosi society, with the high septon at the top and humble neighborhood septons, like Marcus near the bottom. But unlike the political hierarchy, which is based on birth and wealth, The religious hierarchy is supposed to be based on devotion and service. Septon Marcus may never wear silk robes or live in a palace, but his daily work among the poor gives him a kind of authority that comes from earned respect rather than inherited position. The first batch of bread emerges from the ovens with the golden color and hollow sound that indicates perfect doneness. The loaves sing as they cool, tiny cracks and pops as the crust contracts, and the interior continues to cook from retained heat. This is one of the most satisfying moments in a baker's day. The transformation complete, the alchemy successful. Simple ingredients having become something greater through the application of heat, time, and skill. You arrange the fresh loaves on the counter, where their warm glow and intoxicating aroma will draw customers like flowers draw bees. The sight of perfect bread has an almost magnetic quality. Even people who didn't plan to buy bread find themselves reaching for their purses when confronted with golden loaves still radiating warmth from the oven. It's a phenomenon you've observed countless times, but never quite understood, as if fresh bread awakens some primal human instinct that transcends rational thought. The midday rush begins as the sun reaches its zenith and the city's appetite peaks. This is when your bakery becomes a stage for the daily drama of King's Landing commerce, with customers arriving in waves that ebb and flow like tides. Serving this many people requires a kind of organized chaos, keeping track of orders and payments while maintaining the friendly efficiency that keeps customers coming back. During the busiest periods, conversation becomes abbreviated, but no less meaningful. A nod of recognition, a smile of greeting, the small courtesies that oil the machinery of daily commerce. Regular customers develop their own shorthand with you. Mira doesn't need to specify which loaves she wants. Goodwife Meredith's slight nod indicates she approves of today's batch. Garrett's raised eyebrow asks if you have any day-old bread without him having to voice the question. These compressed interactions contain volumes of social information. Your ability to remember each customer's preferences and circumstances demonstrates respect for their individuality while acknowledging their place in your extended commercial family. The mutual understanding that develops over months and years of transactions creates a form of intimacy that's unique to neighborhood businesses. You're not quite friends, but you're more than strangers, bound together by the daily ritual of commerce and the shared experience of life in King's Landing. The lunch crowd includes a new face, a young woman with the bearing of minor nobility and clothes that suggest a household with pretensions to higher status. She examines your bread with the careful attention of someone who's been sent to find the best qualities available and knows she'll be judged on her selection. Her purse is well made but not ostentatious, suggesting a family that has some wealth but needs to spend it carefully. "I'm looking for bread suitable for Lord Donald's table," she says, naming a minor lord whose keep lies just outside the city. He's hosting guests from the Reach, and his cook insists on quality ingredients. This is exactly the kind of customer that makes a baker's reputation. Someone who needs excellence and is willing to pay for it, whose satisfaction will lead to recommendations and future business. You select your finest loaves, bread that's been shaped with extra care and baked to perfection, the kind of product that will make Lord Donald's cook look competent and his guests feel properly honored. These were baked this morning with flour from the reach, you explain, wrapping the loaves carefully. They'll serve your Lord's table well. The young woman pays without haggling, understanding that quality commands its price. Her willingness to spend what's necessary rather than seeking the cheapest option marks her as someone who understands the social dynamics of her position. Serving inferior bread would reflect poorly on her judgment and, by extension, on Lord Donald's household. The transaction illustrates one of the fundamental truths about King's Landing society. Reputation is currency, and currency is reputation. Your reputation for quality bread allows you to charge premium prices, which allows you to buy better ingredients, which allows you to make better bread, creating a virtuous cycle that elevates both your business and your position in the community hierarchy. The afternoon brings a different rhythm to the bakery, a gentler pace that allows for longer conversations and more thoughtful interactions. This is when the regulars who don't need to rush back to work often stop by, and when you have time to engage in the kind of casual conversation that builds community bonds stronger than any commercial transaction. Old Willem arrives, as he does every afternoon, a retired dock worker whose hands still bear the calluses of a lifetime spent loading ships. He buys a single roll and sits on the bench outside your shop, watching the city go about its business, while slowly eating his purchase with the deliberate attention of someone who has learned to savor simple pleasures. Heard there was excitement at the docks this morning, he says between bites. Ship from Bravos brought news that the Iron Bank is calling in some debts. This is the kind of information that flows through King's Landing like water through channels. Merchants and dock workers hear news from incoming ships. Servants overhear conversations in great houses, and within hours, everyone in the city knows at least a distorted version of whatever's happening in the wider world. Your bakery serves as one node in this information network, a place where people feel comfortable sharing what they've heard and speculating about what it might mean. The Iron Bank of Bravos is one of those institutions that most people in King's Landing know about, but prefer not to think about too carefully. Their lending practices have shaped the fortunes of kings and kingdoms, and their reputation for collecting debts is legendary throughout the known world. When the Iron Bank calls in debts, it usually means that someone's financial situation is about to become much more complicated. The Crown's always borrowing money, you reply diplomatically. I'm sure it's nothing that affects honest bakers. This is the kind of political conversation that walks the fine line between engaging with current events and avoiding the dangerous territory of criticizing those in power. In King's Landing, expressing too many opinions about royal finances is the kind of mistake that can lead to uncomfortable conversations with the City Watch. So prudent citizens learn to acknowledge information without drawing conclusions. Willem nods knowingly. As a long-time resident of King's Landing, he understands the delicate balance between staying informed and staying safe. We bakers and dock workers, just keep doing our work and let the lords worry about their debts. The social position of people like Willem illustrates another aspect of King's Landing's hierarchy. The class of people who have worked hard all their lives, saved what they could, and earned the right to spend their later years in modest comfort. Willem's daily visit to your bakery is both a small luxury and a social ritual. a way of maintaining connection to the community while enjoying the fruits of decades of honest labor. The afternoon also brings children, released from whatever lessons or chores occupy their mornings, and drawn to your shop by the irresistible combination of wonderful smells and the possibility of sweet treats. They press their faces to your windows like pilgrims at a shrine, eyes wide with the kind of longing that only children can feel for simple pleasures. Today's group includes Tam, a boy of perhaps 10, whose mother works as a seamstress for one of the merchant families. He clutches a few copper coins in his grubby fist, clearly the result of some small job, or perhaps a reward for good behavior. His eyes fix on the honey cakes with the intensity of a septon contemplating the seven. "How much for a honey cake?" he asks, though you both know he's asked the same question every day for a week. "2 coppers, you reply, as always. Same as yesterday. Tam counts his coins again, apparently hoping that mathematics will work differently today than it did yesterday. He has 3 coppers, which means he could buy a honey cake and still have 1 left over. But 3 coppers also represents significant wealth for a boy his age, and spending 2/3 of his fortune on a single treat requires the kind of serious deliberation that adults reserve for major purchases. The social dynamics of childhood in King's Landing are shaped by the same economic realities that govern adult life, but filtered through the lens of limited understanding and unlimited desire. Children like Tam learn early that wanting something and being able to afford it are different things, and that the coppers they earn through small jobs and good behavior represent real value that must be spent carefully. "Tell you what," you say, reaching for a honey cake that's slightly smaller than the others. "This one didn't rise quite right. How about 1 copper?" The joy that spreads across Tam's face is worth more than the copper you're sacrificing. He hands over the coin with the solemnity of someone completing a major business transaction, then bites into the honey cake with the reverent attention of a food critic tasting a masterpiece. These small kindnesses cost little but mean everything to their recipients, creating bonds of loyalty that will last long after the honey cake is forgotten. The afternoon progresses with the steady rhythm of a well-established routine. Customers come and go, each bringing their own small piece of the great puzzle that is King's Landing society. There's Master Kyburn, the apothecary, who buys bread for his shop workers and always pays exact change. Good wife Nella, whose husband captains a trading vessel and who knows more about conditions in the free cities than most people know about their own neighborhoods. Young Podrick, an apprentice to a minor lord who always seems slightly overwhelmed by the responsibility of purchasing provisions for his master's household. Each customer represents a different thread in the complex weave of city life, and your position as neighborhood baker gives you a unique perspective on how these threads interconnect. You see the patterns of prosperity and hardship, the seasonal rhythms of trade and commerce, the small dramas of daily life that collectively create the great story of King's Landing. The late afternoon brings news of a different sort when Lisa, a servant from one of the great houses, arrives looking flustered and speaking in the rapid, breathless way that indicates important news struggling to escape. "Have you heard about the wildfire?" she asks without preamble. "There was an accident at the Alchemist's Guild this morning. Green smoke everywhere, and they've cordoned off 3 streets. This explains the unusual smells you've been noticing and the strange tension that's been building throughout the day, like pressure before a storm. Wildfire is the Alchemist's Guild's most dangerous creation, a substance that burns with supernatural intensity and can't be extinguished by normal means. An accident involving wildfire could level entire districts if it got out of control. Anyone hurt, you ask, though part of you doesn't want to know the answer. They're not saying, Lysa replies, which in King's Landing usually means the news is worse than anyone wants to admit publicly. But the Gold Cloaks have tripled patrols, and word is they're evacuating the houses closest to the guild compound. The social implications of a wildfire accident extend far beyond the immediate physical danger. The way he phrases the question suggests he knows more about the wildfire incident than most people, which makes sense given his position. Meisters are often the first to know about significant events because they're responsible for sending and receiving the ravens that carry news throughout the realm. His casual mention of the incident is probably an attempt to gauge how much information is circulating among the common folk. Nothing that a good day's baking can't cure, you reply diplomatically. Though I'll admit the green smoke was more colourful than usual. Meister Kyburn chuckles, a sound that manages to convey both amusement and a hint of concern. The pursuit of knowledge sometimes produces unexpected results. I'm sure our alchemist friends will sort things out soon enough. His choice of the word friends carries just enough irony to suggest that the relationship between the Meisters and the Alchemists' Guild is more complicated than simple collegiality. In the complex web of King's Landing politics, different groups of learned men often find themselves competing for royal favour and funding, creating tensions that rarely surface in public, but influence how they speak about each other in private. You wrap his purchase, a simple loaf of brown bread that costs less than what lords pay for white, and accept his payment with the easy grace of a transaction repeated many times. Meister Kyburn represents an interesting category of customer, educated and connected to power, but living on the modest salary that the crown provides to its scholarly servants. His choice to buy practical bread rather than expensive delicacies reflects either genuine humility or careful financial management. Until tomorrow, he says, tucking the wrapped loaf inside his robes. And let's hope it proves less eventful than today. After he leaves, you complete the evening's final tasks with the satisfaction of work well done. The day's earnings sit in your leather purse, a tangible reminder that skill and diligence still have value in a world that sometimes seems to reward luck and birth over merit. It's not wealth by the standards of lords and merchants, but it's enough to maintain your independence and provide the simple comforts that make life pleasant. The bakery settles into evening quiet, the kind of peaceful stillness that comes after a day of productive activity. The ovens radiate gentle warmth that will keep the building comfortable through the night, and the familiar smells of flour and yeast create an atmosphere of homey contentment. This is your domain, the small kingdom where you exercise absolute authority over the ancient alchemy of bread making. You climb the narrow stairs to your living quarters, leaving behind the commercial space below for the private realm above. Your rooms are simple but comfortable, furnished with the practical pieces that a working man accumulates over years of steady income. A good bed, clean linens, a sturdy table for meals, chairs that don't wobble, and shelves lined with the few books that a baker has time to read. The window of your main room overlooks the street where your neighbors are settling into their own evening routines. Across the way, Master Dontos the cobbler is closing his shop, hanging leather aprons on their pegs and banking his small fire for the night. Next to him, Goodwife Mara tends her small garden, picking herbs for the evening meal while her children play in the fading light. This is the King's Landing that visitors rarely see. Not the grand palace or the towering sept, but the ordinary neighborhoods where ordinary people live ordinary lives with extraordinary dignity. The city's reputation for corruption and danger isn't entirely undeserved, but it's also incomplete. For every cutthroat and schemer, there are dozens of people like yourself, Master Dontos, and Goodwife Mara, quietly going about the business of earning honest livings and raising families in the shadow of great events. The evening meal is a simple affair. Bread from your own ovens, cheese from the market, and ale from the tavern down the street. You eat slowly, savoring flavors that represent the fruits of your own labor and the products of your neighbor's skills. There's a deep satisfaction in food that connects you directly to the chain of production, from the farmer who grew the grain to the baker who transformed it into sustenance. As darkness settles over King's Landing, the city transforms yet again. The harsh edges of daylight commerce soften into the more forgiving atmosphere of evening, when people gather in taverns and homes to share the day's experiences and find comfort in human companionship. From your window, you can see lights beginning to twinkle in windows across the neighborhood, each one representing a family settling into the intimate rhythms of private life. The sounds of the city change too, the urgent noise of commerce giving way to the gentler sounds of evening, conversations drifting from open windows, the distant sound of music from taverns, the call of night watchmen beginning their rounds. These sounds create a lullaby of urban life, the audio backdrop against which hundreds of thousands of people prepare for sleep. Your thoughts drift to tomorrow's work, already planning the timing of tasks that have become as familiar as breathing. The dough will need kneading at first light. The ovens will need firing before dawn, and the first customers will arrive as the sun paints the eastern walls with gold. It's a cycle that repeats daily but never becomes truly routine, because each day brings its own small variations and challenges. The wildfire incident at the Alchemist's Guild lingers in your mind like smoke after a fire. Such events remind you that life in King's Landing exists in the shadow of forces beyond ordinary understanding or control. The Guild's experiments with dangerous substances serve purposes that common citizens can only guess at. And the occasional accidents are the price the city pays for housing such activities within its walls. But these concerns feel distant now, softened by the comfortable routine of evening and the prospect of tomorrow's familiar work. The great dramas of politics and power will continue to unfold in the halls of the Red Keep and the chambers of the small council, but they touch your life only obliquely, creating ripples that reach your corner of the city as gossip, rumors, and the occasional disruption of normal patterns. You prepare for sleep with the same methodical attention that you bring to bread making, checking that the shop is secure, ensuring that tomorrow's preparations are in order, performing the small rituals that mark the transition from public work to private rest. The bed welcomes you with the comfort of familiar softness, and the sounds of the settling city provide a gentle accompaniment to the onset of sleep. In the darkness, King's Landing continues its restless existence, never fully sleeping but settling into the quieter rhythms of night. Ships arrive at the docks with cargoes from distant lands. Night watch patrols walk their routes through empty streets, and in taverns throughout the city, people gather to drink, argue, and find temporary escape from the challenges of daily life. Your bakery sits peacefully in the middle of all this activity, a small island of domestic tranquility in the great sea of urban energy. Tomorrow will bring another day of kneading, baking, and serving. Another opportunity to practice the ancient craft that connects you to generations of bakers who have fed their communities with skill, dedication, and the quiet pride that comes from work well done. The yeast in tomorrow's dough works through the night, invisible organisms performing their microscopic alchemy, transforming simple ingredients into the foundation of another day's sustenance. It's a process that mirrors the larger rhythms of the city itself. Slow transformation through patient work, the gradual accumulation of small efforts into something substantial and nourishing. Sleep comes easily to those who have worked hard and honestly, and your dreams are filled with the golden glow of perfect loaves, the satisfied faces of regular customers, and the warm certainty that tomorrow will bring another day of meaningful work in the great, complicated, wonderful, and occasionally terrifying city that you call home. The night passes peacefully, marked only by the distant call of watchmen and the soft sound of wind through narrow streets. In the Alchemists' Guild compound, whatever crisis occurred during the day has apparently been contained, though whispers of green smoke and strange smells will no doubt flavor tomorrow's conversations, like salt season bread. As dawn approaches, bringing with it the promise of another day's baking, your sleeping mind already begins to anticipate the familiar rhythms of work. The feel of dough beneath your hands, the warmth of ovens heating, the steady parade of customers who depend on your skill to provide one of life's most basic necessities. It's a good life, honest and productive, connected to the great chain of human effort that keeps civilization fed and functioning. In a few hours, you'll wake to begin another day's service to your community, another day of transforming simple ingredients into sustenance and satisfaction. The work never ends, but neither does the quiet fulfillment that comes from doing something essential, something that makes other people's lives a little better, a little more comfortable, a little more pleasant. The city sleeps fitfully around you, 700,000 souls finding rest in the shadow of the Iron Throne. And somewhere among all those dreams, your own peaceful slumber continues, unmarked by the great events that shape kingdoms, but enriched by the simple satisfaction of work well done and another day's service to the endless, eternal, wonderfully human need for daily bread. And in the gentle darkness, with the promise of tomorrow's sunrise already written in the turning of the world, King's Landing settles into the quiet hours when even the greatest city must rest, gathering strength for another day of commerce, craft, and the thousand small human dramas that collectively create the great story of civilization itself. The deep hours of night bring their own quiet magic to the city. While most citizens sleep, a different King's Landing emerges, one known only to bakers, night watchmen, and the occasional drunk wandering home from taverns that should have closed hours ago. This is when the city breathes most slowly, when the frantic pace of daylight commerce gives way to something more contemplative and peaceful. In your dreams, you find yourself kneading dough that glows like moonlight, serving customers whose faces shift and change like candle flames in a gentle breeze. Dream Mirror thanks you for bread that tastes like summer rain, while Dream Septon Marcus blesses loaves that multiply in your hands like the miracle of the fishes. It's the kind of sleep that comes to those whose work connects them to something essential and timeless, the ancient human need for sustenance, comfort, and community. The yeast in tomorrow's dough continues its patient work. Millions of tiny organisms feasting and reproducing in the warm darkness of your shop below. They ask for nothing more than flour, water, and time, yet they provide the magic that transforms dense dough into light, airy bread. It's a partnership between human skill and natural process that has sustained civilization for thousands of years and will continue long after the current occupant of the Iron Throne has been forgotten. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls the hour, perhaps from the great sept of Baylor, perhaps from one of the smaller septs scattered throughout the city. The sound drifts across the sleeping neighborhoods like a gentle reminder that time continues its steady march, that dawn will come as it always has, bringing with it another day's opportunities for work, service, and the quiet satisfaction of tasks completed with care. The night watchmen make their rounds through empty streets, their lanterns casting moving pools of yellow light on cobblestones still warm from the day's sun. They know every corner of their beats, every doorway where trouble might hide, every tavern where late-night revelry might spill into the streets. Their presence provides the thin line of order that allows honest citizens to sleep peacefully, knowing that someone watches over the city's slumber. In the great houses, servants bank fires and check locks, ensuring that their masters and mistresses can rest secure in their beds. The nobility of King's Landing may scheme and plot during the day, but at night they are as vulnerable as anyone else to the need for sleep, for dreams, for the restorative power of rest. Even kings must close their eyes and trust in the protection of walls, guards, and the simple human decency that keeps most people in their beds, rather than prowling the streets with ill intent. The harbour sleeps too, though it never truly rests. Ships rock gently at their moorings, their masts swaying in rhythm with the tide like a forest of wooden trees dancing to music only they can hear. Night crews unload cargo by torchlight, their voices carrying across the water in the kind of subdued conversations that suit the peaceful hours. Somewhere out in Blackwater Bay, other ships approach the city, their captains navigating by stars that have guided sailors since the dawn of time. Your own rest deepens as the night progresses, your body recovering from the day's physical labor while your mind processes the countless small interactions that make up a baker's day. In sleep, the concerns about wildfire accidents and political tensions fade into insignificance, replaced by the deeper rhythms of work, rest, and renewal that governs all human life. The dough rises slowly in its covered bowls, developing the complex flavors that can only come from patient fermentation. By morning, it will be ready for your hands to shape into loaves. But for now, it exists in that perfect state of potential. Neither raw ingredients nor finished product, but something in between, full of promise and possibility. The city's cats emerge for their nightly hunts, stalking through alleys and side streets with the silent confidence of apex predators in a world scaled to their size. They serve as the city's unofficial pest control, keeping the rat population manageable while asking nothing in return but the occasional scrap from a sympathetic cook. Their presence adds another layer to King's Landing's complex ecosystem, where every creature, from the highest lord to the humblest alley cat, has a role to play. In the Red Keep, guards pace the battlements under stars that shine with the same light that illuminated Egon, the Conqueror's first glimpse of this coastline 3 centuries ago. The weight of history presses down on everything in King's Landing, but it presses most heavily on those whose decisions affect the lives of millions. Tonight, that burden rests on other shoulders while you sleep the peaceful sleep of those whose responsibilities extend no further than ensuring tomorrow's bread is as good as today's. The tide turns in Blackwater Bay, beginning its slow retreat toward the narrow sea. This ancient rhythm, older than humanity itself, continues its eternal dance regardless of human politics or ambitions. The sea recognizes no kings, acknowledges no borders, and follows only the laws written in the movement of moon and sun. It's a reminder that beneath all human drama lies something larger, more enduring, and ultimately more powerful than any throne or crown. Your breathing settles into the deep, regular rhythm of profound rest, your body releasing the small tensions accumulated during a day of standing, lifting, and moving. Sleep is the great equalizer. In dreams, bakers and kings are equally powerless, equally dependent on forces beyond their conscious control. It's a vulnerability that would terrify us if we were awake to contemplate it. But in sleep, it becomes a blessing, a chance for the mind to sort through the day's experiences and prepare for tomorrow's challenges. The harbour sleeps too, though it never truly rests. Ships rock gently at their moorings, their masts swaying in rhythm with the tide like a forest of wooden trees dancing to music only they can hear. Night crews unload cargo by torchlight, their voices carrying across the water in the kind of subdued conversations that suit the peaceful hours. Somewhere out in Blackwater Bay, other ships approach the city, their captains navigating by stars that have guided sailors since the dawn of time. Your own rest deepens as the night progresses, your body recovering from the day's physical labor while your mind processes the countless small interactions that make up a baker's day. In sleep, the concerns about wildfire accidents and political tensions fade into insignificance, replaced by the deeper rhythms of work, rest, and renewal that governs all human life. The dough rises slowly in its covered bowls, developing the complex flavors that can only come from patient fermentation. By morning, it will be ready for your hands to shape into loaves. But for now, it exists in that perfect state of potential. Neither raw ingredients nor finished product, but something in between, full of promise and possibility. The city's cats emerge for their nightly hunts, stalking through alleys and side streets with the silent confidence of apex predators in a world scaled to their size. They serve as the city's unofficial pest control, keeping the rat population manageable while asking nothing in return but the occasional scrap from a sympathetic cook. Their presence adds another layer to King's Landing's complex ecosystem, where every creature, from the highest lord to the humblest alley cat, has a role to play. In the Red Keep, guards pace the battlements under stars that shine with the same light that illuminated Egon, the Conqueror's first glimpse of this coastline 3 centuries ago. The weight of history presses down on everything in King's Landing, but it presses most heavily on those whose decisions affect the lives of millions. Tonight, that burden rests on other shoulders while you sleep the peaceful sleep of those whose responsibilities extend no further than ensuring tomorrow's bread is as good as today's. The tide turns in Blackwater Bay, beginning its slow retreat toward the narrow sea. This ancient rhythm, older than humanity itself, continues its eternal dance regardless of human politics or ambitions. The sea recognizes no kings, acknowledges no borders, and follows only the laws written in the movement of moon and sun. It's a reminder that beneath all human drama lies something larger, more enduring, and ultimately more powerful than any throne or crown. Your breathing settles into the deep, regular rhythm of profound rest, your body releasing the small tensions accumulated during a day of standing, lifting, and moving. Sleep is the great equalizer. In dreams, bakers and kings are equally powerless, equally dependent on forces beyond their conscious control. It's a vulnerability that would terrify us if we were awake to contemplate it. But in sleep, it becomes a blessing, a chance for the mind to sort through the day's experiences and prepare for tomorrow's challenges. In the ancient alchemy of transforming simple ingredients into sustenance and satisfaction. And as the darkness slowly gives way to the first pale hints of dawn, as the city begins its gradual awakening from the restorative embrace of sleep, your own rest continues for a few precious moments more, unmarked by ambition or anxiety, touched only by the deep contentment that comes from knowing your place in the world and fulfilling it with skill, dedication, and quiet pride. The bread will rise, the ovens will warm, and life will continue in all its messy, complicated, beautiful humanity, one loaf at a time. But that work belongs to the daylight hours still to come. For now, in the gentle darkness before dawn, there is only peace, rest, and the profound satisfaction of another day's honest work completed in service to the endless human need for daily bread, community, and the simple comfort of knowing that some things, like the rising of dough and the turning of seasons, remain constant in a world of endless change. The castle sleeps, the looms rest, and even the gossip has curled up for a nap behind velvet drapes. If tonight's tale lulled you or made you smile at a miswoven lion, go ahead and like or subscribe. No pressure. My heart's steadier than a Lannister's wine hand. Until next time, may your dreams be quiet, your burdens light, and your threads always lead you home.